Hello everyone, and this is my review for TNA Slammiversary 2015. And you know, I get such a mixed bag watching this show. Watching the entire show in full, I felt it was a good wrestling show. It really was. It was, each match progressed pretty well throughout the entire night. Some of them without really much or any kind of introduction or any real reason behind it. Particularly the X Division title match, which got kind of just announced right beforehand. What is it? The EC3 Tyrus versus Mr. Anderson and Bobby Lashley. They were kind of just playing off old feuds there, but feuds that had already ended. They weren't really much of anything to begin with. And the actual King of the Mountain match, which was the main event of the night, didn't really have much build up, didn't really have a lot going around it at that point in time. But like I was saying, the X Division title match was a really good match. It was fun to watch. Robbie E and Jesse, they were kind of playing off of what they had been doing for the past month and a half, kind of, on and off, how they've been trying to continually build the feud there. And that match came off rather okay. It wasn't anything spectacular. And like I said, it kind of played off of what they had been doing for a while. So, you kind of had some story-driven content there. You had other areas that had story-driven content, such as Bram going up against Matt Morgan. Bram playing off the aspect of going up against everybody inside of TNA's past. I like the aspect that, they're not having Bram actually lose a match yet in this case, so they don't necessarily have to end this type of feud or anything like that. Maybe they can even potentially bring in somebody bigger from that past at some point in time. Who knows where they're going to go with that, or how much longer they're going to go with that to begin with. Davey Richards, Austin Aries, I thought was a relatively good match as well. A good way of setting up what was Austin Aries making it an Iron Man match for the final match in their best of series. I wish like I said, I wish that was going to be the only gimmick match, and also I wish they would have ended it on this pay-per-view. This pay-per-view could have used something that was of that kind of importance. Them finishing the series on the actual pay-per-view itself, and then having something down the road for the next set of Impact or anything like that. Even though they have kind of already done the Impact tapings, I don't actually talk about tapings all that much. I kind of review each show as it is. But even though they had already done the tapings before the actual Slammiversary pay-per-view, you kind of wish they could have ended it on this pay-per-view, because the pay-per-view would have gone off with at least a little bit more importance after that. The Knockouts match with Brooke and Awesome Kong and the Dollhouse was relatively okay, did what it needed to do to continue furthering on that particular storyline, but really in the grand scheme of it wasn't much of anything. I know they're going to be having the triple threat match on the next Impact Wrestling, so in the grand scheme of it was kind of just there in that sense. The match with James Storm and Magnus I thought was great. The quote unquote unsanctioned match, or just basically another street fight like Bram and Matt Morgan was earlier in the show, was a rather good one, and I like how they played off the technical difficulties afterwards, blaming it on James Storm and Magnus. No actual area of saying that they did cause those, but they had some technical issues afterwards with commentary and a few other things, so I'm glad they were able to find a way to play off of that a little bit, but they might have just had those technical issues anyway, so who knows how that actually went about. The match between the two of them was really good. I liked Magnus's promo before the match, basically kind of saying his goodbyes to everybody, because it has pretty much gone out there that he is leaving the company. And it was in that sense a good way of not furthering on the feud. I know I think they have something for the tapings. I'm not sure. Like, again, I don't talk about the tapings much. I kind of talk to them about when I do these reviews, I kind of just do, show by show. So I haven't really looked at the taping results and everything like that, because I kind of try to watch each show as they come out. The match with Bobby Lashley and Mr. Anderson versus EC3 and Tyrus, though predictable, was an okay match. It was rather good. Throughout most of the show, you figured, it was going to be rather predictable. Like, again, because they did the tapings beforehand, most of these matches would be very, very predictable in the way that they went. It was just a matter of how good they were going to come off on TV, and if there was going to be any kind of story-driven elements behind it in any way. And, the only way we're going to know is based on what we're going to see in the next upcoming weeks with each of the Impact tapings, whether or not you're going to have any extra story-driven elements based around the Slammiversary show. Now, this brings me to the King of the Mountain match. I've actually never been a big fan of the King of the Mountain match because, in the end, most of the times, it just came about as a giant mess of everything that eventually determined a world champion. Not so much in this one. I kind of like the story they built around this one. They actually built a fairly interesting story to build to what I would say would be a very predictable finish, but still a finish nonetheless that had a build around it, and it built up to it throughout the entire match. And that was pretty much how they depicted Jeff Jarrett throughout the entirety of the match. Of course, you had Drew Galloway in there. You had Bobby Roode, Eric Young, and Matt Hardy in there. Kind of just a mishmash of people that were in the match. And then you also, of course, had Jeff Jarrett in there, making his one and only return, or you would assume possibly his one and only return to TNA pay-per-views. And like I said, the story of the match I felt was rather good. You had you had the heels like Bobby Roode and Eric Young going after Jeff Jarrett, causing him to be in the penalty box for the initial portion of the entire show. Or not the entire show, but the entire match. Them going after him, causing the pin, and then I like how Eric Young, right as the penalty time came off, went out there and attacked Jeff Jarrett and got a pinfall of his own there, and that added elements of the story. Is like, will Jeff Jarrett be able to overcome this or anything like that, or anything in that aspect? Of course, you also had the relatively decent spots in there, especially with. Or not relatively decent, some really good spots in there, like Drew Galloway going off the top of the cage, off the penalty box cage. The pile driver on the ladder outside looked way too dangerous, looked awesome, but was way too dangerous. I never really want to see that kind of spot again. It almost feels like it's too dangerous for this day and age to attempt a spot like that. But that's just me in that case. It looked like something could have majorly gone wrong, though in most cases almost any move can majorly go wrong at any given time. I get that, but that one felt like it was a little bit overboard with actually taking that risk there, and it was almost kind of shocking that Jeff Jarrett would try to take that risk with Eric Young, and not in the aspect of saying that Eric Young is unsafe, but just that spot in general for both guys. Just a lot could have gone wrong to that spot. But continuing on with that, how they were building that story of how Jeff Jarrett could try to overcome, it's like, okay, it looks like you had Matt Hardy and Drew Galloway down for pins, but then all of a sudden Eric Young and Bobby Roode sneak in there and get conjoining pinfalls on Matt Hardy and Drew Galloway, preventing Jeff Jarrett becoming eligible, which of course eventually Jarrett becomes eligible, and they go through that entire aspect of who's going to try to be able to climb the ladder to put the belt up top of there, which initially was you're thinking is like, okay, they're creating a new champion. Why are they creating a new championship? And then they were basically using the old global and television titles and Legends titles. So, it kind of made a little bit more sense there. That title had always meant something different. So why not make it the King of the Mountain title? I'm okay with that in that sense. But everything leading up to Jeff Jarrett eventually winning the match, it built to that finish, and it was relatively well told throughout the entire match. So I have actually no complaints that you got a well told story of the match itself, and you had a couple of spots here and there that make it look even better without throughout the entire match, and all in all that came off really, really well. That was probably the most enjoyable King of the Mountain match I've ever watched, honestly, because like I said, it told a story throughout the entire match. You had this aspect of it. You had the aspect of Jeff Jarrett in there, and then everybody else kind of intertwining around that. And it told the story really well and did what it needed to do. Yes, again, predictable outcome, yeah, but the story telling it was rather good. So all in all, like I said, I think I rather enjoyed this show. I think there were certain aspects of it, especially into building the show itself, that were lacking and made it almost feel less important than what it was. But overall, I found the show rather enjoyable. Slammiversary was each of the matches was rather good, and you got a really good storytelling aspect to it towards the end with the King of the Mountain match. And I'm always saying, emphasizing that one, because you did have good storytelling elements with James Storm and Magnus. You actually had something there with the Dollhouse and Awesome Kong and Brooke Tessmacher. And you also had storyline elements with Austin Aries, Davey Richards, and Jesse versus Robbie E. You did have some of those, but the aspect of, okay, this one didn't have a build, and they were able to tell a good story through the match, was through the King of the Mountain match. I thought was just that one kind of put it over the top on that case in the terms of, okay, you didn't have much of a build and you're able to get me a good story out of this, and that was one thing I was actually very happy about for the entire night. So overall, I felt TNA Slammiversary was rather good. I think to some cases people would feel that it was lackily built, had a lack of build going into it, and I would agree with them in that case. I do think there was a lack of build, but in some cases, of these matches, it kind of overshadowed that lack of build with the performances they were able to put on inside of the ring, and in some cases, the stories that they were able to tell throughout the entire match itself. So that is my review for TNA Slammiversary 2015, and I thank you guys for watching.